my god, it's not even working. Alright, it is. Okay, we're up. Sorry about that. What up, guys? It's your brother Joe here, and welcome to my F1 2019 season review. We are racing as Antoine Hubert in France. I feel it's kind of fitting because we tragically lost that young man in Spa this year, who I've no doubt would have gone on to drive for in F1, and well, I reckon he'd have been amazing. Oh god, trying not to collide with a lady there. Also, Correa remains in recovery, and I wish him the best in said recovery. Hopefully he'll be back to racing next season. Right, so let's talk about the F1 Championship a bit then, and well, what a season it's been. It's literally had it all. We've seen Hamilton run away with it, granted, but we've also seen the rise of a lot of young drivers out there. We've seen chaos. Well, it's practically had every ingredient an F1 season could have, you know, minus a close championship fight. Bottas gave it his best go early in the season when he gave himself the nickname as Bottas 2.0, but unfortunately it just wasn't to be, and unfortunately other rivals fell by wayside a bit. I mean, Ferrari, what the hell have they been doing all season? That's what I want to know. Whether it's their strategy or just how they are with their drivers. You know, there's been quite a few mistakes within Ferrari this season, and we will talk about some of them a little bit later on. Red Bull have really made strides since they've gained the Honda engine, and for me, Max Verstappen is the most improved driver of the last 12 months. He's really matured quite a lot into the driver he is now, and he's had his best season yet. He's finished third in the standings this year, so he's really given it his all. He's had 3 wins, 2 of which are races where his rivals seem to have lost their heads a bit during the race while he kept his, so we'll discuss that a bit later on as well. So we're going to talk about drivers that have stood out against drivers that haven't firstly, and for me there are 5 drivers that have really stood out in doing really well, so we're going to talk about them first. The first of which is obviously Lewis Hamilton. You know, whatever your opinion of the guy is, he's out there creating history. He's out there writing his name into the record books, and in years to come people are going to wish people who join watching F1 later are going to wish they'd watched Hamilton do what he did, you know, so it's quite an honour to see him do what he's doing. At the moment he is just the one to beat. Whether that's down to the car, whether that's down to him, you know, a lot of people will have different opinions on the matter, but I think you've got to have the full package if you're going to win it, and Lewis has that, as not only does he have his own driver skill, but he's got the best team behind him, and the best team of strategists behind him. Hungary, at this point, when it comes to strategy, comes to mind. When he made the decision to pit 15 laps from the end, he had a lot of time to make up, and he still made it up and won the race, so that to me says everything about the team, about Lewis, and I think he needs to have more faith in his strategist, personally. Also the race in Monaco, where he drove with literally tyres that had just completely gone, despite challenges from, again, Max Verstappen. That's going to be an interesting rivalry to watch, Lewis versus Max, because it's clearly developing, and Max is really taking the fight to him, so I'm hoping to see more of that next year. But Lewis is definitely the first driver I'd mention as standing out. The second of which, Carlos Sainz. Now, it can't go unsaid that McLaren have made massive strides forward this season, but it also can't go unsaid that Carlos is really just coming to his own this year. He's really come out of his shell, and he's
make sure you keep it positive as we
Schumacher brake test me one more time, I swear to God. But yeah, Carlos has really come out of his shell, and he's just developed into this fine, mature racing driver, and he's made a couple of great races from the back to get himself well into the points. Brazil really sticks out, last to third, albeit slightly helped by Hamilton's penalty, but nonetheless a stunning drive. And he's finished 6th in the championship, beating the Red Bull driver, well, 2 Red Bull drivers if you want to be technical about it. So to have been able to do that speaks volumes, and I'm really pleased for Carlos that he's been able to do as well as he has. And I'm hoping to see another step up for him next year. Maybe we'll see him on the podium again. The third driver I'd say stands out has got to be Max Verstappen, purely because of just how much he's matured over the last year. Like, if you remember the first half of 2018, you know, and even before that, there were a lot of silly mistakes.
Let's catch up to the field a bit. We're dropping too far back. Remember that we need to stop.
Shut up, Jeff.
Understood. Copy that.
Sorry about that. But yeah, if you remember how many rookie mistakes that were made in the first half of last year, where it got to a point where it was almost every race one was creeping in, and then you watch the transformation over to this season. Been on the podium multiple times, 3 great race wins, including the very wet race of Germany, which I was hinting at before, where it was just a destruction derby really. Cars were going off everywhere, there was all sorts of drama. Lewis Hamilton had his pit lane thing, which my friend, if you follow her on Instagram, Racing Point Perez, Sergio Perez fan page, she's actually put a video of that to the, you know, the We Me music? Yeah. It's very funny, so if you find her Instagram there, you'll be able to check that out. But, you know, it was a race where a lot of top drivers seemed to be losing their heads a bit. You know, Hamilton went off and had his thing, which resulted in the pit stop. Leclerc had it in the wall. But through it all, Max was the one that kept his head, and he took a brilliant win. And then you had obviously Kvyat on the podium, Stroll finishing 4th, which just highlights what a crazy race it was. And then obviously you had Brazil, where he won, and, you know, I'm not even going to deny that that was him winning a straight fight against Lewis Hamilton. You know, he won that fair and square with his strategy, and then when the first safety car came out after Bottas had his failure, when the first safety car came out, he made the decision to pit where Lewis didn't, and straight away Max got the move done, took the lead, and that was that. He checked out from that point. All the events that transpired later just, well, we don't discuss those. That was a bit of a crazy end to the race, which we will discuss later. But in races like that, Max kept his head, put in mature performances, and I think next year he's ready to take the championship fight to Mercedes. It all depends on whether Red Bull obviously give him the car, but given the car, I'm saying just watch him. How many have I done now? 3. Alright, the 4th driver, and I'd like to say has stood out, and I may be a little bit biased in this one, is Charles Leclerc. Anyone who knows me knows I'm quite possibly the biggest Leclerc fanboy going. But trying to look at it from the outside looking in, it's his second full season in the sport this year, and his first with Ferrari. So taking all that into consideration, I mean, it's been a mixed bag of a season, you know. Up to Monaco, I was thinking, you know, as much as I love him, damn, you know, have they moved him up to Ferrari too soon? Could he have benefited from another season at Alfa Romeo? And this is a question that a lot of people still ask, just because of the rookie mistakes that we have seen from him. But, you know, it's no secret that in the second half of the season, the concentration. I'm trying to concentrate on the race and doing commentary at the same time. But it's no secret that he really stepped it up from, I'd like to say, France onwards. But, you know, the first race that he really stood out was Bahrain, and that, what happened there with his engine, that was heartbreaking to witness, because Bahrain was a weekend that he had entirely dominated. Nobody was able to touch him all through that weekend. And even in the race, yeah, he made a couple of mistakes at the start, but he fought his way back up into the lead, and it just looked like his race. And unfortunately, what happened. But then obviously we get to Monaco, and again, as I was saying, you know, after Monaco I was thinking, okay, have they moved him too soon? But then we get to Montreal, and although he wasn't quite with Seb's pace, he still put it on the podium. And then we get to Austria, where he leads all race again. Unfortunately lost it in the last couple of laps to Max Verstappen. But the battle between Max and Charles at Silverstone, that was quite possibly one of the highlights of the year, which is, again, something I'll be bringing up later. And then we get to Spa, obviously, where what happened. And obviously Charles racing after what happened. But again, it's just shows that when tragedy strikes, you know, this guy is completely headstrong. He got his head down and took his first win in very good fashion. You know, it was reminiscent of the F2 race where he'd lost his dad literally a day before the weekend. He went into the F2 race and absolutely owned it, and he did the same in Spa, and then he obviously dominated the Monza race a week later. And Hamilton, well, Mercedes, both drivers threw everything they could at him, and he still held the lead. A lot of people will say that it wasn't exactly deserved, that he was defending against the rules, that it was dirty, etc. You know, say what you want, but Mercedes threw everything they had at him, and on that day he was unstoppable. So watching him win Monza was definitely a highlight of the season, and one of the reasons why, again, he is one of the standout drivers this year. Second season, and he's done alright. There's a lot of room for improvement, but I think he knows that, and I think him and Ferrari are going to go into the winter and work on that. So the fifth and final driver I'd like to mention is really standing out for me, and, you know, he's a driver that I wouldn't say, you know, it's not what he's done, it's more just, well, it is what he's done, but he hasn't really got the car to show what he can do. And the fifth driver is a driver that I don't think has had a fair chance to show his potential, and that is George Russell. You know, that Williams is, there's no other word to put it. The car this year has been terrible, and it's been disappointing to see a team of Williams' heritage where they are. You know, it's been really a shame to see Williams where they are, and yeah, I want to see Williams back to winning ways. I want to see Williams great again. But George Russell this year, I feel like he's completely outdriven the car, and he's really done a brilliant job with it. Out-qualifying a teammate like Robert Kubica 21 times is something quite astounding. Now, obviously, Robert has been racing with his hand injury, and he's been out of F1 for years, so people will say, well, he didn't have the same speed he once had, and that he's now past it, but I don't think Robert is a bad driver at all, and I think to be able to beat him 21 times in qualifying and 18 times in the race shows... I don't think it's a case of Kubica being that bad. I think George Russell is just that good, and I think that if he were given a faster car, he would be unstoppable. If we look at Hungary, for example, where he very nearly put that Williams in Q2, he drove the lap of his career, and I think he was something like 0.02 of a second away from being in Q2. What more needs saying other than that to prove his ability? And I think that was one of the another standout moment of the season, but a standout moment for George. I think he should be extremely proud of his rookie season. And one thing I like about this kid is that he's got the car he's got, and not once have I heard him complain about the car, about the team. He's just got his head down, got on with it, and done the best job he can. And I think that shows quite a lot of maturity for someone his age. I look forward to seeing more of what he's got. Like, I think there's a lot more to be seen from George Russell just yet. So those are my 5 standout drivers. I would like to give an honourable mention to Alex Albon. Obviously, the rookie who started off in Toro Rosso that's moved to Red Bull in replacement of Pierre Gasly, who's a driver I'll mention later. But Alex has had an impressive rookie season. He drove well for Toro Rosso, and then he was put in the deep end at Red Bull, and he very nearly put it on the podium in Sao Paulo, and I hold the opinion that he was completely robbed of that. But fair play to Hamilton on that one, because it instantly, you know, Hamilton owned up to his mistake, and he didn't even challenge the penalty he got, so that was a fair play for him for admitting his own responsibility there. But I would have liked to have seen Albon on the podium, but I reckon there's a lot more to be shown from him next season. He's put in a few good performances, some of which, you know, he's had to really sort of extract performance out of the car when he's had to battle his way through the field, but he's done it. So I'd like to see more of what Albon has to offer next season. Like I said, he was very nearly on the podium in Brazil. So, next up we're going to discuss drivers that I think really didn't cut the mustard this year and that I expected more from. So I thought we're going to do better than they actually did. So for me, this section is about drivers that just did not meet expectations. So we're going to go straight into that, and the first driver I'm going to mention here is Robert Kubica. I have 3 of these. Robert, obviously, like I said, he just got absolutely trashed by George. I don't think he's a bad driver. His comeback just didn't live up to what I had hoped it would be for him. You know, I was hoping that he'd at least get better results against Russell on the board, but I don't think that's necessarily him being bad. I just think that's George being that good. It's obvious that Robert isn't the same driver he was before the crash, and I think that's really shown this season. Wherever he goes, though, I do wish him the best, and I hope he finds something that he can... I hope he finds something, like... I don't want to see him completely out of racing. I don't know, maybe other series could beckon him, but for now, it is goodbye as he is being replaced by Nicholas Latifi from F2, who's actually right in front of me. I do look forward to seeing what Nicholas Latifi has to offer, but I mean, in F2, in my opinion, and this may go down like a lead balloon, but I don't see how Nicholas Latifi really stood out in F2 this year. I can't think of one real moment where he did. You know, if I would have thought that if Williams were going to grab anyone, I would have thought maybe they'd take a look at someone like Luca Giotto. But that's just my personal opinion. For what it's worth, it's either worth, you know, it may as well just be worth a bag of chips, to be honest. See, the second driver that I'd like to mention that just hasn't quite lived up to what I'd hoped he would, and a lot of people are gonna... What is that one? I'm not sure how this one's gonna go down, but Pierre Gasly's Red Bull stage, you know, I'm not gonna count his time in Toro Rosso for reasons that I'm going to get into while discussing this, but, you know, in the first half of the season he was driving Red Bull, and if I'm honest, he really just did not live up to any kind of expectations at all. He was consistently off of Max's pace, and he was just nowhere. And I think the one thing that stands out there is the fact that Max was able to lap him in Austria. But having said that, and I'm going to throw the other end of this argument out now, since Pierre was demoted to Toro Rosso, he's been killing it. Like, Pierre has just driven some brilliant races, put in some great performances, and let's not forget the fact that he made the podium in Brazil, and after everything he's been through this year with the demotion and just all the criticism he's taken, it was deserved, and you could tell how much it meant to him on his team radio celebrations, which was completely reminiscent of Senna back in '91 when he took his first home win. So that obviously meant a lot to Pierre, and I think in the second half of the season he did more than deliver on what he should be at Toro Rosso, but he really didn't deliver what he should have at Red Bull, and it's a shame, like, but I reckon with the right people behind him and with another season at Toro Rosso, give him the experience, and he will be ready to take on the front. But then again, you know, maybe something else calls him. Maybe he goes to IndyCar, maybe he goes to World Endurance Championship. So the third thing I'd like to call out as not living up to expectations, and this isn't really a driver, this is a team as a whole, is Ferrari as a team unit. Just because of a lot of the shenanigans that has gone on with Ferrari this year. I mean, one's got to say, you know, what the hell has gone on with the team this year. Obviously we've had new ownership in the form of Matteo Binotto, but really, you can't really make excuses for the errors within Ferrari this year, and there have been many of them. For instance, Bahrain, where Leclerc led all race only for the car to mess him up. Then you've got the endless poor strategy calls, where the drivers really would be pitting in no man's land in terms of the 1 or 2 stop strategy zones, and some of the strategic calls that were made during the races, it left people scratching their heads. And obviously we now get to Monaco, where the team elected not to send Leclerc out for another hot lap in qualifying. And just because of the way the track was evolving, he got knocked out at the first qualifying, which is something nobody wanted to see, but the track evolution was much higher than what the team had anticipated. And, you know, even the fans were head scratching at that, wondering why they didn't send him out. So it was disappointing for that to happen. But then it also comes down to the way that the drivers have been managed as well. Now the issue is, one of the issues are, you've got two drivers that both want to be number one in the team. You've got Charles Leclerc, who has done what he's done this year, and he's shown that he is more than capable of taking the fight to Vettel. But you've also got a four-time world champion in the form of Vettel, who is eager to show that he's still the number one in the team. And I don't think the team quite know how to manage what they have on their hands with that one. And some of the team order decisions have often, again, left us all head scratching. Or when the call has come to make the team order, it's often been quite a late call. Like you would have seen one driver holding up the other for multiple laps, and then later on they say, right, let them go. So it has left people a little bit confused. And then obviously there's been the reliability issues within the car. There's been a few of them this season. Like I said, we had Leclerc's engine issue in Bahrain. Vettel lost his engine as well in Russia, which again was a race that I feel was Seb's to lose, because that race he'd driven well, and he was pulling away from Leclerc, whatever the team orders were saying. And I think that's one that should have been left well and truly alone. Sadly, we weren't able to see whether Vettel could have clawed the lead back, and as a result of Ferrari tripping over themselves, once again, Lewis was gifted a win. So Ferrari spent a lot of time this year tripping over themselves due to the issues within the team. So I'd say as a unit, they deserve this sort of, they deserve a mention for not really doing what they should have been doing. You know, the car was quick, but it was unreliable. And the other issue it had was that, yeah, in a straight line, it was absolutely the fastest car, but it couldn't corner for shit, if I'm honest. Pardon the language. So I think Ferrari really need to go back to the drawing boards on that one, and also need to take a look at the issues within the team before they can even think about going for World Drivers' Championship. Like, they need to use this winter to take a long, hard look at whatever's going on now. Speaking of whatever's going on, there's a bit of an incident in front of me there. I had to back out of that one. So I don't have any extra I nearly lost it there. I don't have any extra sort of dishonourable mentions. You know, those are the three that haven't really stood out and done what I expected them to this year. So let's take a look elsewhere on the grid then. Checo Perez has had a really good season considering the car he's got, and obviously in the last race in Abu Dhabi, absolutely just, he made the first set of tyres last, and that's something we generally see a lot of with Perez. You know, he is very good at extending a stint on a particular set of tyres and taking them long. It's what got him some great results in his early days, the fact that he could hold on to the tyres, and that was demonstrated once again this season, particularly in Abu Dhabi, where he went very long, was able to pit near the end, take on a fresh set of tyres and take P7, which got him 10th in the championship. And I feel like Perez quite often this season has outdriven that racing point. As for Lance Stroll, well, I'm not gonna go long on my opinions of him, but it's very clear to me that he's in the team purely because of his dad. Like, I don't think there's any other reason logically he'd still be in the car. Having said that, you know, he's had some impressive showings. Obviously, his Canada, where he got points in his home race, and Germany, where there was a call of strategic genius to bring him in for slicks at exactly the right time, and well, that got him P4, which was very nearly P3, but Vettel drove the race of his career in Germany from the back to finish second. I'll give Vettel his juice for that. That was great to see. So let's look at Alfa Romeo then. A lot of people would say that Raikkonen has more than exceeded expectations of him in that car, and he finished 4th in Brazil, which was great to see. It would have been nice to see Kimi on the podium, but I don't think he'd want to do the podium interviews, though. And I think watching the coverage this year, there was one moment of Kimi's that just made me laugh, and that was when the pundits were trying to get him to play a game, and he just got on his scooter and he disappeared off. As for Giovinazzi, well, we'll discuss that later when we come round to discuss the rookies this year, which is going to be up next. But let's take a look at Renault. So obviously Hülkenberg has not got a drive for next year, and given that he is quite a big personality of the sport, it's a shame that he's not got that drive for next year. But yeah, if I'm honest, he throughout his career has been massively hyped, and unfortunately he just hasn't been able to live up to said hype. Whether that's been down to bad team decisions, or whether he just hasn't been given a fair chance, or whether, you know, there's a number of things that could be said, but I feel like it's a shame. It's a shame that we didn't get to see him on the podium in the end. Although he had many chances, and he just didn't quite translate the opportunities into getting there. The one that sticks out the most wasn't actually this season. It was back in 2012 when he was fighting Hamilton for the lead, and he made a mistake, went into him, and he messed his car up. Having said that, you know, in Germany he was running 4th and he was on for a great result, but unfortunately he got caught out by running wide on that drag strip, which caught out even the best of drivers. So, and as for Daniel Ricciardo, all I have to say is, do you regret leaving Red Bull yet? Because look how far Red Bull have propelled themselves this season. They've done absolutely brilliantly, and I think Daniel Ricciardo, I think he's kind of shot his career in the foot there. Having said that, he's had some good showings this year. He got 4th in Canada, but yeah, this is a driver who was saying he wanted to win championships, so I'm not quite sure why he made the call he did to move to Renault. I guess that's something only he knows. Having said that, Renault, they got 5th in the Constructors, but obviously they want better. Yeah, they were promising World Championships in the next few seasons, which is all well and good and everything, but they've been saying that for a few years now, so I guess they're targeting 2021 when the new regulations come in. That might be their best bet at this stage. So we've discussed McLaren, we've discussed their improvements. Is there any other team? Haas, yeah, let's discuss Haas. Grosjean. Now, Grosjean, again, here's an opinion that probably will go down like a lead balloon, but why is Grosjean still in F1? No, really, why is Grosjean still in F1? I can't think of any way this season that he's really sort of not only just not has he not stood out, but he's just, again, there's a lot of mistakes that come with Grosjean, and there's a lot of questionable things, one of which being the fact that he binned it in the pit lane at Silverstone. And in my opinion, Grosjean's been very, very lucky to retain his Haas drive. I'm not quite sure why he still has it. I mean, he's had his... I'm not going to say that he's an entirely bad driver. He has shown that he has got speed. He's been on the podium a few times, but especially in the last couple of seasons, you know, I don't get it. And obviously there's been the run-ins with Magnussen this season, which have happened as well. But on the plus side, the season Haas have had this year, it's going to make it for a great season of Drive to Survive. If you haven't seen it, Drive to Survive, or you're not familiar with what it is, it's basically a documentary that is available on Netflix, which covers the F1 season from a load of different teams' perspectives, actually. Like, you get a lot of Haas, which is where Gunther Steiner has now been made famous as a reality TV star. It's predominantly like midfield teams. There was a lot of Red Bull as well, which I think is great to see. But I've heard that Mercedes are have done an episode this season. But if you haven't seen the first season of Drive to Survive, it's on Netflix. I recommend you check it out. If you don't have Netflix, I don't know, find somewhere to illegally stream it, or ask your mate for his Netflix password. I don't judge here. As for Magnussen, I mean, he's a driver that... I don't think he's a particularly bad driver. I mean, you only have to look at his first ever race in Melbourne, where he was able to get on the podium for McLaren. But, I don't know, I don't think... Are his performances this year just down to the fact that the Haas car just hasn't been living up to the expectations? That's what I want to know. I feel like the Haas as a team unit this year just haven't had... They've been lacking something, you know, both with drivers and teams, so... It'd be fascinating to hear some of your thoughts on it. Finally, we're going to round out this part by talking about McLaren. Boy, the gains they've made this year. They have planted themselves firmly fourth in the Constructors' Championship, got Carlos sixth in the Drivers' Championship, had a podium and had a string of great results. So McLaren are definitely back on the up, and it's good to see them in the fight once again. There's obviously been some heartbreak, what with Lando having his issues here at France actually, where he still managed to hold on to a points finish, and the heartbreak that came from Spa, where he was running fifth for most of the race, looking set to take that, and unfortunately the car had the issue that it did. But I mean, Carlos this year has been incredible, or should I say, the smooth operator. See, every time Carlos gets a good result now, I look forward to hearing him sing Smooth Operator. I want to see him do a full cover of that song now. I don't care if his singing is bad. I want to see that. I want to see the full Carlos Sainz Smooth Operator. That's something that needs to be seen. But yes, big gains for McLaren this year. And I'm thinking they're going to continue on that into 2020. They're also looking at 2021. Jesus, that's not the way to enter the pit lane. But I think they're going to be looking at continuing said gains into 2021. And I look forward to that. I don't think they're going to jump into World Championship territory straight away. But I think they're going to be in a position to sort of, you know, make the top three teams just a little bit, make them sweat a little bit.
Tatiana is in the pits. Tatiana in the pits.
Right, so I think we're now on to the stage where we discuss the Rookie of the Year. And for me, well, hands down, I've got to say, even though Albon has stood out in getting the Red Bull drive, I've got to say, for me, the Rookie of the Year has been George Russell. Again, simply because of what I said, you know, that Williams this year has been... It's been a bit of a disappointment, really. It's really not lived up to the expectation. Well, not, I wouldn't say the expectation, but it really hasn't lived up to what you'd expect from a team of Williams heritage, a team that's been where Williams have been. And they've had overall a bit of a shocker this year. But I think George Russell has really stood out as the Rookie of the Year. And we are going to discuss more on the rookies. We are going to dissect them individually. Although I don't quite like that turn of phrase. We're not literally cutting them open, guys. But I'd say pound for pound, George Russell has been the Rookie of the Year. Just because of, as I mentioned earlier, you know, what he's done in that car. And the fact that he very nearly got that car into Q2 in Hungary. One of the big standout moments of the season. But who are the other rookies then? Let's talk about them. And I'm going to start off with Antonio Giovinazzi, who is partnered with Kimi Raikkonen in Alfa Romeo. And he's actually been signed on by Alfa for a second season. So let's discuss him a little bit. First half of the season, well, the less said about him, the better, really. He really had a bit of a wretched time of it in the first half of the season. Although the standout moment there was when he got his first point in, I think it was Austria, he scored a point. And you also had Germany, where the team did get 7th and 8th, and Antonio was just behind Kimi, and that would have been a great result for him to have, but unfortunately the car was deemed illegal. So he was promptly disqualified along with his teammate, which was a shame. But in the second half of the season, I don't know, I noticed a definite improvement in him. I mean, if you exclude Abu Dhabi, where he just ran into Kubica, I'm not quite sure what he was doing there. But there was a definite improvement in Giovinazzi, and while, you know, while I still remain sceptical, you know, while I'm still unsure, I think the improvement he's shown has definitely earned him the benefit of the doubt, I'd say. I think he deserves a second attempt. You know, just as a, okay, you showed improvement, now show us what you got. But if I'm honest, I think Alfa are keeping, you know, I think Alfa are just keeping a seat warm and ready for Mick Schumacher, who we're going to discuss later. But although there's been a lot of shaky moments this year for him, there has been quite a significant sign of improvement. Like I said, he took 5th in Brazil, which was quite significant. So, and he's always sort of been there or thereabouts with Kimi in terms of qualifying. And sometimes in terms of the race, if I'm honest. It's just that the Alfa Romeo hasn't necessarily been able to get the results, obviously, because it's not been a great car. So I want to see more of what he can do before I place too much of a judgment call on him. So up next, I think it's time to discuss Alex Albon. He really drove well in his first few races in Toro Rosso. He got up to speed quite quickly and was usually there or thereabouts with his teammate Kvyat. And when he got the call for Red Bull, a lot of people were surprised. There were people that were surprised that it wasn't Kvyat that got the call, because obviously he got the podium in Germany. But I think they made the right decision with Albon. I think he has more than proven himself as worthy of being in that Red Bull seat. And while, you know, some are saying he's just there to be a number 2 to Max, if the hierarchy works, it works, you know. But I think Alex has got a lot more to show, and I think for a driver who was thrust in the deep end in his first season, I think he's delivered what Red Bull has needed of him. So I think it's one of those things where only time's going to tell more of what this young driver has to offer. I look forward to seeing it. I think Albon has definitely got potential there. He was robbed on the podium in Brazil where Lewis Hamilton went into him. Some could argue that Albon could have left more space, but you know, it is what it is. Obviously we've discussed George Russell, so let's discuss young Lando Norris, who was last year's F2 runner-up, I believe, to George Russell actually. And Lando has shown, he's shown that he's got the speed, he's shown that he's got maturity. Like I say, he put in that performance, well, at France, to take a points finish, despite the fact that the car was suffering multiple issues. He's put in some great performances. 6th in Bahrain is one of the standouts. And while we're on Bahrain, I just want to say that I think it's ironic that Renault prevented Red Bull from getting on the podium one more time. But he nearly took 5th in Spa, but he had that engine issue at the end, which was really quite sad to see, and his team radio there made me cry a little. But the only thing I'd say he lacks is the consistency, but I think give him next year and I think he will show significant improvement in that. Like, I don't think he's necessarily bad. I think A, he's gone up against a driver like Carlos Sainz, who's just absolutely knocked it out the park this year. And B, you know, it's been a good rookie season for him, and I think that while he has bore the brunt of some of the worst issues, you know, he's still done well considering it's his rookie season. I'm really not bothered by anyone right now. I'm leading this race quite comfortably. But yeah, Lando has done quite well this season. I think once he tweaks the consistency, he's going to be one to watch. And I think if McLaren can continue making strides, well, who knows where they could end up. And also, I've got to add, I really like him and Carlos Sainz as a team unit. I think they are the best thing for each other, because Lando brings Carlos out of his shell, and Carlos brings out the best in Lando, and just watching them two and their banter throughout the season, it's something else. Like, they've become something of a bit of a family unit. I think a lot of teams could learn from them. And also the banter he's had with Daniel Ricciardo has been great. I'd love to see them two as teammates someday. That press conference springs to mind. I'm not going to go into details, but you know the one I mean. You know the one I mean. Oh God, don't want to spin it out of there. Right, so we're pretty much getting near the end of this discussion and this review and this video now. So, before I wrap up, there are one or two things that I would... Stop exceeding track limits, Joe. There is one final thing I'd like to discuss, and that is the highlights of the season. Including Carlos Sainz's team radio. There have been many highlights for me this season. I mean, if you exclude this race, obviously, the French Grand Prix this year, you know, this is the circuit that is still on the calendar over Hockenheim. And why is Hockenheim being taken off and this track stays on? The last couple of races we've had here just They've been absolute snoozers. They really have. But that's just one man's opinion. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Yeah, highlights of the season. I have, again, 5 that I'd like to pinpoint. Oh, that's wide around there. The first of which has got to be the German Grand Prix. Hands down, one of the best races we've seen in a, well, one of the greatest races that there has been, and one of the most dramatic races there have been. I think it's been the most dramatic race we've had since Canada 2011. And I'm gutted to see Hockenheim go, I really am. I think it's one of the tracks on the calendar which has a great history. But it's not just because of that I'm sad to see it go. I'm sad to see it go because, you know, there's always been good racing around there, and I think it is going to be missed. But the German Grand Prix this year was just incredible to watch. You know, you never really knew where to look next or what was going to happen next. It was just a race of so many twists and turns. And let's not forget Seb Vettel coming from the back as well. So that's definitely one of my highlights of the year. The second is Charles Leclerc winning in Monza. Now that, whenever a Ferrari driver wins in Monza, you know, it's always a special thing. But to see him take it in Monza, and see not only how much that meant to him, but the fans, that was a pretty special day. And obviously, as he's my driver, I was elated to see that. He had to work for it though, he really had to work for it, as Mercedes threw everything they could at him. Controversially, he took a black and white flag during that race, which is the first use I'd seen of that flag in a long time, so I'm glad that they're starting to look at alternatives other than straight away just willy-nilly dishing out penalties. But yeah, that was his race from the get-go. He weren't going to give that up without a big fight, and he really did fight, and he took the win just about over in the end. Valtteri Bottas, Hamilton pitted because in fighting Leclerc the way he had, he'd completely destroyed his tyres. So I think the call to put Leclerc on the hard tyres in that race, although at the beginning I was slightly confused, that turned out to be completely the right call. And obviously we saw Leclerc stand on that famous podium, look down on the adoring Tifosi, and, well, became a hero in Maranello overnight there, really, for that. What other highlights? Well, the last 10 laps of Sao Paulo, what can be said about that? However, what we don't discuss is the fact that the two Ferraris just went into each other. Now, I maintain that that was 70-30 Seb's fault. But, you know, both in an incident like that, you know, when two teammates collide, I think there's always a share of the responsibility that has to be put on both drivers. But aside from that, you know, that was just crazy. Yeah, there was close racing, there was shocks, there was drama. And then you have the last couple of laps where Lewis and Albon had their collision, and Pierre Gasly made it into P2, and just hearing his celebrations, if you didn't have a tear in your eye over that, well, you must be made of stone. But that race just proves why Sao Paulo has earned its place on the calendar. That was just something else, those last few laps. And then you obviously had the big drag race over the last sector with Gasly and Hamilton, and Pierre was not letting P2 go without a fight. They were pretty much side by side all throughout the last sector, and eventually the Honda engine just really held its own against the Mercedes, and Pierre took that P2. Other highlights include the Leclerc-Verstappen fight at Silverstone. That was incredible to watch. A lot of people agree that that was just hard, aggressive, but fair racing, and that's more of what we want to see. And that's another rivalry that seems to be developing. You know, you've got Hamilton v Verstappen, but you've also got Verstappen v Leclerc, two young drivers that are both future world champions in my opinion, and they are going to be fighting it out for the championship in seasons to come. I'm trying to think of the other season highlights now. Obviously the last 15 laps of Hungary, where Lewis just drove his heart out to take that win. I mean, he really went for it. You could tell how much he wanted that one. It was nice to see the tribute to Antoine in Spa, obviously, where on lap 19 everyone gave a standing ovation because obviously he is car 19. Bahrain was a good race, but we don't talk about it. I do not talk about that. I'm not going to lie, I was in a complete state over the last 10 laps where Leclerc had his issue with the engine, and just watching him lose 2 positions towards the end, knowing the inevitability, that was torture. That was heartbreaking. But there have been many other season highlights. I said I had 5, I can't remember the last one I was going to list. So I would also say the Austrian Grand Prix, actually. There you go, the Austrian Grand Prix, where Max made that charge from the bad start and still took the win. I think a lot of that was down to the strategy that he placed, and that was great to see. It was great to watch, it was exciting racing. He was just picking them off one by one. So, that pretty much wraps up the discussion of this season. But what about next season? What are we all expecting to see? I'm expecting to see McLaren close the gap that little bit more. I want to see Racing Point give Perez a car where he can show what he can do. And I want to see more Hamilton v Verstappen fights, because when those two fight, they really duke it out. And obviously, as a Leclerc fan, I want to see him take more than 2 wins next year. And I think if Ferrari can deliver the car and work on their issues within the team, there is definitely the potential for that. Oh, that is sideways. But yeah, also F2 this year, De Vries took the championship, and he's now got on to Formula E. Wish him all the best with that. Mick Schumacher, I want to see more of what he can do, because I don't think he's fully shown it yet. And again, it's a shame what happened to Antoine happened, because I feel like he would have been a Renault driver in the next couple of seasons. But Ocon has the seat for next year, so it's going to be interesting to see what he can do against Daniel Ricciardo, and obviously what new signing Nicholas Latifi can do against George Russell.
And it's time now for the podium celebrations. How well deserved is this one? This is a team all about giving talented young drivers an opportunity to race and to win. Arden are your winners here today.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for this discussion of this season. Is there anything that I missed that you feel like I should have mentioned? Please drop it in the comments box below. Join the discussion. I've been Joe. Thank you for watching. And until the next video, it is goodbye from me.